Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Museum of the African Diaspora. My name is Elizabeth Gessel, and I'm the Director of Public Programs here in San Francisco. MOAD is a contemporary art museum, and our exhibitions and programming inspire learning through the global lens of the African diaspora. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the challenging circumstances we are all in, and I hope everyone in the audience today is safe and healthy. MOAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and Casey Goodson. We grieve for so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of state-sanctioned violence and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. As this list continues to grow, MOAD will continue to say their names, as our commitment to honoring the victims and to attaining true racial justice is unwavering. As many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples on whose land we are located. With deep respect, MOAD acknowledges that even in virtual space, we reside on unceded native lands and thank the indigenous people of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I welcome you all to MOAD Online and to our series, Conversations Across the Diaspora. Thank you to our host, Sarah Ladipo-Manica, who is generously volunteering her time and her brilliance for this series. I want to acknowledge Peggy Woodford Forbes for helping to support Conversations Across the Diaspora, and to thank everyone here today who has joined us, with special appreciation for those who have donated to the museum during this pandemic. We would not be able to produce this programming without your support. We are thrilled to be presenting a conversation today with Senator Cory Booker. I will introduce our host, who will then introduce our esteemed guest. Sarah Ladipo-Manica was raised in Nigeria and has lived in Kenya, France, Zimbabwe, and England. Sarah is a novelist, short story writer, essayist, and founding books editor for Aussie.com. Her debut novel, Independence, is an international bestseller, while her second novel, Like a Mule Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun, has been translated into a number of languages. Her nonfiction includes personal essays and intimate profiles of people she meets, from Toni Morrison to Michelle Obama and Pastor Evan Mawire. Sarah previously served on MOAD's board and currently serves as board director for the Women's Writing Residency, Hedgebrook. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that introduction. And thank you to all the audience. We can't see you, but we know you are out there. And thank you so much to Senator Cory Booker, who I will briefly introduce now. Senator Cory Booker grew up as Cory Booker in northern New Jersey and received his undergraduate degree from Stanford University. At Stanford, Booker played varsity football, volunteered for the campus peer counseling center, and he wrote for the student newspaper. He was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship and went on to study at the University of Oxford, and then Yale Law School, where he graduated in 1997. Booker moved to Newark after law school and started a nonprofit organization to provide legal services for low-income families, helping tenants take on slumlords. At 29, Booker was elected to the Newark City Council, and in 2006, Booker served as Newark's mayor for more than 7 years. In October 2013, Booker won a special election to represent New Jersey in the United States Senate. In November 2014, Senator Booker was re-elected to a full 6th term, and again, just recently in November 2020. As Senator, Booker has brought an innovative and consensus-building approach to tackling some of the most difficult problems facing New Jersey and the country. And to highlight the many issues that Senator Booker has worked on would take all day, but I would just highlight one area and say that Senator Booker has emerged as a national leader in the effort to fix our broken criminal justice system and end mass incarceration. Senator Booker helped craft the most sweeping set of criminal justice reforms in a generation, the First Step Act, which became law in December 2018. Booker sits on the Judiciary Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, and the Environment and Public Works Committee. welcome Senator Cory Booker.
Sarah, thank you very much. I'm grateful, and it's such a good opportunity to be in community and in conversation with you and this incredible institution, which I feel so blessed to be with today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And Elizabeth, I'm going to just highlight that your screen is still on, and maybe we can take that off so we have a bigger vision of Senator Cory Booker here.
Oh, and I see me, Sarah.
Oh, I see. Okay. So when we scheduled this conversation, Senator Booker, there was a lot of uncertainty. There were elections that had not been held. We didn't know if there would be a vaccine for COVID. We didn't know if we would be crying or laughing, how we would be feeling at this time. There was a lot of uncertainty. But one thing that was very clear for me was that I wanted to be speaking with you in this month at this time, because I knew that you could handle whatever situation we would find ourselves in. And I knew this based on who I know you to be and your approach to this country. So it's just super special that this has actually happened and you're actually with us at this time. And I wanted to reel back and go back in time to when I knew you as Cory. I think the first time I met you, Cory, was 28 years ago in Oxford. And I was thinking, if I had known at that time what you would go on to do, and if I had said to you, you know, Cory, I can see in 28 years' time, 2020, that you will have been a US senator, you will have run for president, you will be vegan, you will have this amazing girlfriend who is this great actress, and she is a Jedi in a recent series that I was watching. If I had said those three things to you, what would you have laughed at the most all those years ago?
Well, I became a vegetarian in Oxford and knew even then I was going to be a vegan, so that wouldn't have surprised me at all. Dating a Jedi would have probably shocked me, but I think that even by then in 1992, I realized that that life will always exceed if you are if you have a great imagination for yourself and the contributions you can make and are willing to take risks. I had already learned by that point that life would always expand your sense of the possible. If you had said to me at 18 years old that 4 years later I would be in Oxford meeting incredible people like you, I would have said that's impossible. What would I be doing in England? And so I feel like I've been on a blessed journey to try to give to the world, but I seem to get such abundance back, and it leaves me feeling very humble and sometimes on some days unworthy, frankly. So I'm grateful to be where I am, and I just hope I can prove worthy in the years to come.
Cory, we're going to talk about where you are as we continue to talk today, but I wanted to start off with where you have come from. You have written a wonderful autobiography entitled United: Thoughts on Finding Common Ground and the Common Good. And this book, it is a wonderful book. I don't say that lightly. It's a wonderful story. It's your story. It's the story of those who have shaped you, who have impacted you. And you quote a lot of my favorite writers as well, which is another plus, including James Baldwin. And in fact, you begin the book with a quote from Baldwin. And the quote is basically, know from whence you come. If you know where you come from, there's absolutely no limitations to where you can go. And so I wanted to start our conversation with talking about where you come from, talking about your parents. You tell this amazing story in the book that I've also heard you tell in other settings as well, about your parents having to move from DC. Your father, if I'm remembering correctly, was a salesman for IBM. He rose very quickly through the ranks. And I think the move from DC to northern New Jersey was around professional reasons for both of your parents. And they tried to look for housing. They would go to houses that were advertised as up for sale. And then surprise, surprise, they would get to the house and they would be told, oh, the house is sold. I wonder if you can finish the story for me, but tell us why that story is important to who you've become and why it's an important story for all of us to hear today.
Well, the first part of the story was a very shaping story. I was a baby, barely a few months old. And my parents, after being denied housing, found this incredible group of activists, a black woman named Lee Porter, a white man named Arthur Lessman, a Jewish man named Marty Friedman. This group of activists just said, this is not going to stand, and we may not be able to change everything, but we're going to do something. And they ended up putting a sting operation together where my parents would go look at a house, be told it was sold, and a white couple would come right behind them and find out the house was for sale. And in the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold, but the white couple put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted, and on the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My dad did, and Marty Friedman, and the real estate agent didn't give up. He was so upset that he actually punched my dad's lawyer, and they got into a fight as he sicked a dog on my dad. But yet that's how we got into that neighborhood. And so as I'm growing up, my dad, who had a very different reality, he grew up poor to a single mom, was really ended up being taken care of by the community and an incredible family that became my family, who took him in. His story was one of tough struggle, and now he's raising his two kids in affluent suburbs. As he used to say to me, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. And so I was given, by the time I'm 18 years old, again, I'm living a life beyond my dreams. I'm president of my class, on my way to Stanford University as a high school All-American football player, honor roll, all these things that my parents just said to me. In fact, I still remember finishing all my school. My dad's like, I'm at Oxford, Yale, 2 degrees from Stanford. My dad's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get. It's about the service you give. Prove yourself. Are you really worthy? And so the interesting thing is I didn't know the second half of that story until I journeyed into life. Went to, as you said, went to Newark and started working, representing tenants, city council person, mayor, helped to transform the city, and then Senate. And then I did what a lot of senators do who have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write this book. And that's when I was really shaken, because I tried to find the people that helped my family move in. Lee Porter was easy to find because she's still head of the Fair Housing Council in northern New Jersey, 93 years old now, incredible soul.
Wow.
And she sent me to the lawyer that organized everything. And what shook me when I talked to this elderly, retired New Jersey judge was not the whole interview. I got everything I needed to write the chapter, but then at the end I asked him a question that wasn't on my list of questions, which was just why? Why would you represent black families at a time that there was fears of white flight and real estate prices going down? Everybody was afraid of us and black folks. And he just told me the simple story of sitting on his couch on March 7th, 1965. And the date didn't mean anything to me at that moment. It should have. But he said he was watching what most of America was watching. I think it was on CBS. It was a TV movie called Judgment at Nuremberg. And so here his heart's already being broken up about the horrors of the Holocaust. And then they break away from an ongoing movie to show a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And he watches as these marchers, led by a man he didn't know at the time named John Lewis, literally bleed upon that bridge. And he got up with such a force of determination. This young lawyer who had just started a business was struggling to make it. And he said, I'm going to go to Alabama. And then he realized he couldn't afford a plane ticket, not to mention to close this little tiny firm. And so he just thought, and he did something that I think is the secret to the hope of America, which is just an American deciding this cannot stand, and I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And he decided 1 hour a week he could spare pro bono work, called around, and he found this young woman named Lee Porter who said, I need help. And that was 65. He said years later, they perfected what they were doing. They got the sting operation, and then he gets the case file. And he says to me, and as he's talking to me, he goes, I got this case file of this family. I got them in housing. You know the name on the case file? And I said, no, sir. He goes, Cory, it was your parents, Carrie and Carolyn Booker. And so I am literally sitting here in this office because of those marchers on Edmund Pettus Bridge, but also because a white guy on a couch 1,000 miles away didn't just sit there. There's this wonderful saying that I take from Angela Davis, but I think many people have said it, that it's not enough to say I'm not a racist. If racism exists, you have to be an anti-racist. If sexism exists, homophobia, bigotry of any type, if that's existing in our country, you can't just say I'm not that. You have to be working against it. And he did that and changed the course of my family's destiny. So And so I'm grateful for the question, and it still humbles me today. When the first thing I did before I got sworn into this office, the last thing I did was to go see John Lewis and sit with him in his office. And it was one of those moments where he was very emotional about what it meant. I'm only the fourth Black person ever popularly elected in the United States Senate. And, to sit there with the man that changed my life in a very dramatic way, as well as all of us who stand on his shoulders, it's just been a meaningful journey to me that I'm still trying to live up to the giants like him.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things you do in your book is you talk about these giants like John Lewis and the impact they've had on your life. And you talk about the choices that you have been able to have thanks to all who have come before you and your parents. You could have been a great athlete. I mean, you were a great athlete, sorry, but you could have probably become a professional athlete. You could have definitely worked in a corporate law office. You could have, I think you can go on to be a great writer and write many more books. You could have got lots of choices, and you talk about why and how you thought about choices in life. But I want to focus in on one choice, Cory, that I'd like you to talk to us about, which is your choice of where you live in a low income neighborhood. Tell us about your choice. I think you earn enough as a senator. You're not waiting for a stimulus check, I don't think. You earn enough to live in different kinds of neighborhoods. Tell us about this choice about where you live.
So I think that all of us should blossom where we're planted, bloom where you're planted. And just because you've decided to be a corporate lawyer doesn't mean that you can't change the world like Arthur Lessman, who was a private attorney as well. But for me, I just made a choice as a very young person that I wanted to be a part of communities in struggle. I wanted to be connected to what animates me and what drives me every day. And so when I came out of law school in really before that, 1996, 97, I moved, I picked a place that people told me not to go, which was a strip of Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark that is, I think it's the first time I heard gunshots at night when I'd be sleeping, or had people shot in front of where I lived. The first time I saw a drug trade like as virulent as that, and I just immersed myself in the community. And it was the first time I was actually afraid for my life in a way that of sort of being caught in something that was beyond me. So the what I found though is when in life when you step out into darkness and you follow your heart or your values, that life was going to send you people to help you, and that's when I was sort of rescued by. I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD in the streets of Newark, because my professors just started appearing, and the first woman who shook me in our very earliest interactions was a woman named Miss Virginia Jones, who, as you know, I write about in the book, who in one of our first interactions says to me, describe the neighborhood, and I describe it just like I described it to you, the danger and the graffiti and the abandoned buildings, and she just got angry at me, and she basically said to me, you can't help me. And I'm like, I'm a Yale trained lawyer, for crying out loud. What do you mean I can't help you? I was like all high on myself. And she's like, boy, you need to understand that the world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of these people who only sees problems and darkness and despair, then that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, you see opportunity, you see love, you see the face of God, then you can be someone who helps me. And she walked away from me. And I remember coming back to her with a lot less attitude and just realizing that I'm going to learn from this woman. And she was a tenant president of these buildings. I would eventually move into these buildings and live there. And I everything that I am, in fact, right here, this is the great of Zoom. That's the central ward of Newark. It's like about the biggest thing in my office, because I never want to forget the community that first took a chance on me. And I still live in that community today, and right down the street from where the projects used to stand. And I love my community, love my neighbors. We don't confuse wealth with worth. I continue to be challenged and inspired and driven and sourced by this community of color that I think the median income 10 years ago, the last census, was about $14,000 per household. But it is such a rich place, and it so informs the work I do here for our state and our country.
Cory, I wanted to ask you about your approach to prioritizing things. There is a lot that is broken in our society, in our world. There is so much that ails us. How do you, and you have taken on many issues and continue to, how do you think about what you are prioritizing? And maybe, you know, what are priorities for you as a senator today?
Well, I mean, I represent people, so I have to, in my state, there are a lot of things, like I just got off of a Zoom before I came here with the Regional Plan Association and the urgency of infrastructure in the greater New York metropolitan area. The tunnels that connect connect Manhattan to New Jersey are maybe have 15 years left of life. They're massive projects. They will probably amount to one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the country. So I have to deal with the people I'm representing and the biggest problems, whether it's Hurricane Sandy or what have you. And clearly we're in a crisis right now, monumental proportions, the third largest mass casualty event in the history of the United States. And that means really running at this hard and being in it. But you know, I tell my team all the time that, and the reason for that map is, life is about purpose. It's not about position. And my purpose has stayed the same since I was that 28-year-old running for city council. I love my country, and yet I feel like we are so still far short from our highest ideals. And I believe that the American dream is real for no one unless it's in the reach of everyone. And so my purpose here in Washington that drives me in the same way as a city council person is to attack those issues that can best help our country be who we say we are. This great experiment or this great yearning that has yet to be fulfilled. But I believe we are called, especially if we put our hand on our heart and swear an oath, liberty and justice for all, we are sworn to try to do that work. So a lot of the things I do too are about economic justice and opportunity, about environmental justice, about reforming a criminal justice system, as you said in your introduction, and the kind of work that can create a more prosperous society for everyone. And I believe, you know, as I'll quote McKinsey here happily, as one of their studies I think showed that if, you know, blacks had the same access to capital as whites who are similarly situated, we'd have about $1 trillion larger economy overall. We all are going to benefit from creating a more just, inclusive, equitable society. We will increase the abundance and the human flourishing in this country.
Cory, I want to just dig a little bit deeper around this question of the American dream, particularly as it relates to Black folks. 2020 has really been a year of racial reckoning. And I want to talk about this a little bit more because you talk about this a lot. You've been involved with a commission. I think it's, you call for a resolution for like a truth and reconciliation is how I'm interpreting it. Maybe you can say a bit more about that. I'd like to hear more about how you feel that we can address some of these issues of racial justice and how we can get to a place of healing. That's my question, but I'm going to add one more thing and say that a previous guest on this show, the great playwright and actor Anna Deavere Smith, said to me she remembers you saying that African Americans must resurrect hope every day. And that was such an amazing line. And yes, so the notion of resurrecting hope is also something I'd love to hear you talk about.
Yeah, so I'll deal with them both, but maybe the hope question first is like, I always say, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. Because to love someone is to know them, and there is so much heartbreak, so much hurt, so much wretchedness that goes on in our country every day that should be heartbreaking to all of us. And I learned in Newark the hard way. I really learned what it means to be broken, to be shattered. You know, as I talk about in the book, the one child that was killed, a teenager killed, and I'm desperately just trying to stop this kid from bleeding to death. And it was almost like the enough was enough. I'd lost an election for mayor in 2002. It would be 2 more years until I would eventually run and win. But I had just seen too much death. I'd lived in this community now for 7 years or so, and just defeat after loss after and yet, so how do you find it? Hope. I was broken. I was just broken. And so I just think that the inspiration I've always taken that has gotten me through have been the people who are my elders, who somehow through tragedy have found a way. I mean, Miss Jones, the woman I just told you about, her son was murdered in the building I would move into, and yet she never left. And she was one of the most hopeful people. But I know that hope was scarred and wounded and injured and probably died. And she resurrected it for all of us. And I remember that day after that kid got murdered, and I wrote about this in my book, because it's a moment I think about a lot, because her mantra, I say the words to myself all the time to try to reconnect to her spirit. Miss Jones's passed, but I remember getting up that next morning after that child's death, and after scrubbing his blood off of my hands, and getting into an elevator and getting down to the lobby of those buildings and crossing through this lobby, and somehow as I'm walking through that lobby consumed by my own pain and hurt and rage, I somehow remembered as I'm walking through it that was the lobby Mrs. Jones's son came out. And then I'm in the courtyard, and poof, there Miss Jones is on the other side of the courtyard between the projects. And I'll never forget, almost as if she heard me screaming on my insides, 100 feet underwater, she turns around and does exactly the only thing I need. Is she just opened her arms. Somehow she knew that I needed a hug. And so I run to her like a child, and yet I'm a grown man, 6'3" and much bigger than she is. And she throws her arms around me, and I just break. I start crying, angry tears, hurt tears, broken tears, hopeless tears. And she just says over and over again these 2 words that became that mantra to me, and got me through tough days in Newark where I was broken again. Even weeks like this one where I feel like I'm banging my head against implacable walls of resistance. The one government of the G7 countries that wants to be stingy in terms of the relief that they give. And the words she said over and over, she's rubbing my back, nothing to do with religion, everything to do with how we have endured, how we got over, as the song says. She says to me, just stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. And so for me, I have tried to be in a position like this and not get stuck in a bubble of privilege that is a senator, and go to meet with a incarcerated woman, pregnant woman, immigrant, detained, who wasn't getting the medical care, go across the border and meet with women who have been sexually assaulted, who were denied asylum, to go to the lowlands of North Carolina and meet with people who have been so deeply affected by factory farm CAFOs that have trapped them in their own homes. I mean, and to stay connected to this fight, because I only know the best way to resurrect hope is to stay connected to those people that are not denying the wretchedness and brokenness and jagged shards, but to those people who are living there and yet still are in the fight and still believe and still have faith.
Mm. Cory, in terms of staying connected and staying on that theme, there's a wonderful documentary entitled Street Fight, which is about your first mayoral campaign. And there was a moment that was, well, many moments in the documentary that were poignant to me, but one particular moment when you were staying connected with people, you were talking to people, and people were asking you questions in the community. And I think the youngest person, at least in the documentary, who asked you a question, his question was to you, is you lying?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I wonder how that question made you feel then, and how that question would make you feel now, given the environment in which we're living, where there's arguably even less trust of what politicians are saying?
God, first of all, a lot of praise for the filmmaker, the artist. He's now won Academy Awards. This was his first documentary that got nominated for an Academy Awards and lost to a film named March of the Penguins. But he did, I was blown away.
But you would approve. You're a great lover of animals, so.
Morgan Freeman had narrated our documentary.
Yeah, exactly.
He just did this brilliant job, but he caught me in so many real moments. In fact, I don't think that many people would let documentarians in like that. We gave this guy amazing access. So here we are in a basement of a building, community meeting. I'm getting crushed by my opponent, who is challenging my blackness, who's challenging my authenticity, who's challenging my very living in the community where I lived. I mean, and these things are getting currency. And so I often have to deal with skeptical people who think that everything that I present is just too good to be true. And I still remember that moment I captured in the documentary where it wounded me. It was just like took the breath, like a gut punch. And I learned, again, everything I know I learned in Newark. I learned then and through those early campaigns that the cynicism we have, the understandable cynicism we have about politics and politicians, I get where that comes from, especially when you're in communities like the one I live in, where you voted so often, you've put your faith, and it just doesn't seem like much is changing. And so I deal with that sentiment all the time. I used to get on the presidential campaign trail. My staff would sometimes tell me that they'd say things like, "Oh, people think you're too good to be true, so they don't believe you." So I just know that's why we need artists in every profession, and the elected leaders I look up to most are those who not only have the prose right, but are masters of poetry that can touch something real in them, touch it to something real in you. And that's sort of what I try to do in inspiring people to believe, not in me, but to believe in us.
Boy, there's always this great generosity of spirit that I just really admire. I admire in you. You have this amazing way of pulling people in. That I just wanted to say as an aside. But I'm going to pivot now. We've been talking particularly focused on America, and I want to talk about the world, the broader world. This is the Museum of the African Diaspora. And I know that you have visited the continent of Africa as recently as I think 2 years ago, when you went to a couple different countries, including Zimbabwe, which I know something about. And so I wanted to, and I know there's Zimbabweans on listening to this conversation. I just wanted to ask you particularly about Zimbabwe. Why that trip? And
I'll tell you, but I want to get there a little bit differently because when I was a mayor, Henry Louis Gates comes to me and calls me up and says, "Hey, I really want to talk to you. I do this show called Finding the Roots." And I'm like, "Of course I know you do this show, Finding Your Roots." And I thought he was going to ask me to come to a premiere or something. He's like, "No, I want to do a show on you." And I was sort of like blown away, like I hit the lottery. This is really exciting. Until he tells me, "I'm going to partner you with John Lewis," which was so sobering to me. Because the beginning of that documentary, the beginning of that episode is sort of like they give the bios of both people. It's like John Lewis, hero of the civil rights movement, on the Edmund Pettus, literally bled the southern soil red for freedom. And then it goes to me, Cory Booker, growing up in suburban New Jersey, falls off his big wheel, skins his knee. It's just like the mountain and the boy with John Lewis. But the one thing I loved about it was that he broke through. Most African Americans, unless you were an immigrant African American, it's very hard to trace your history back beyond the first time blacks sort of showed up in the census with the 1870s. And he came back to me sort of wide-eyed and just said, "You hit the lottery. I've never been able to get this far back with many blacks." And he was able to identify a lot of the people who were enslaved in my family. Beautiful portraits of these incredible folks, and also my European ancestry. My grandfather's grandmother was a woman named Henrietta Stamper, who was fought for by her slave owner because he was her father. And knowing then the Stamper family, he traced it all the way back to 1640, coming to this country in 1640. Well, we all know 1619. And the gift he gave me was testing my DNA and telling me literally where in Africa I was from, and where my DNA led me back to, Sierra Leone and Cameroon. And I don't know what it was. Him telling me that ignited even a deeper feeling of connection. I could feel that. I've always known I'm descended from slaves, but now I somehow know the beginning of those trips, those horrific stealing of and bondage of human beings, and it was a powerful cord that was then strengthened to me and Africa. That was a gift that he gave me that I can never repay. And so I wanted to becoming a senator. As a mayor, you really don't deal with that much international issues, except for maybe parking at the International House of Pancakes. So now I'm suddenly a senator, and I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I'm able to work it so that I'm the top Democrat on the Africa subcommittee, and I get this big delegation to go to Zimbabwe, amongst other countries. But Zimbabwe was very important to me and Jeff Flake, I should say, who was the co-led he's a Republican from Arizona, because we both wanted to go there, and Mugabe had just been, I don't know what the right term is, but...
Well, there was a coup that was not a coup, but...
Yes, that's exactly right.
He moved on.
A coup that was not a coup, he moved on. And Emerson Mnangagwa ascended, and we wanted to go meet with him because we also were talking to a lot of the pro-democracy folks in the country who really wanted a free and fair election. And this guy was, his nickname was the alligator, I guess, and had been a part of the Mugabe sort of regime. And so we were flying there to have a bipartisan conversation. We already had sanctions on Zimbabwe, and we're talking about the turning point. Will we tighten more sanctions on, or will you relax and open up to free and fair elections and allow us to relax our sanctions as well? So we went there on that mission. I will tell you this, that was when I first got it, because as we're landing, Emerson Mnangagwa is landing too, and he's landing from China. And the Chinese message to him, as I read in local newspapers, was, we don't care if you oppress minorities or your political opposition. We don't care if you hold free and fair elections. We just want they say an exploitative relationship with you that's very mercenary, in my opinion. And so that's when I began to realize the sort of vast influence on the continent that China is beginning to have.
Mm-hmm. I'm sort of smiling to myself at the emphasis on free and fair elections. That is something every nation in this globe needs to pay very special attention to.
Wow,
yes.
What are you talking about right now?
Yeah.
I will tell you a funny story. I was in India during the 2000 elections. I was a city council person, and I was traveling to India to spend time in an ashram and meditate, I think. And when our election problem started, I loved it. I took a delight in the Indian newspaper saying we need to send election observers to the United States to help work through this. There is often this sense that has really been undressed right now about the assumptions we make about our democracy, and when we fail to look at it from an external eye, the Americans, I don't think we realize, first of all, how fragile even our democracy is. I think we're realizing it now. But that we don't also have a corner on controversy.
Mm-hmm. Boy, the time flies by too quickly, and so I'm just going to. We have some special guests who are going to ask some questions. So I'm going to ask one more question of you, which we ask of all our guests, which relates to the African diaspora, and that is, if there's one thing that you could change about the way that people think about the African diaspora, what would it be?
first of all, in general, I'm still, to hear a president talk about S-hole countries and fail, and America as a whole. I think we often look at Africa through humanitarian lenses, and it's just such an awful lens not to see the grandeur and the greatness and the glory of Africa. And as a person who has had the privilege of being very connected to Ghanaians and Nigerians and so many people who I know from the diaspora and that are here in the United States, prideful Americans, honoring the connections of their ancestors. It is a glorious tapestry that is Americans of African descent, glorious tapestry. And I wish, it's so hard to unpack this, but so much of it is implicit racial bias, so much of it is colonialist sort of bigotry and more. But to know the diaspora here in the United States is to know the promise we have as a country and for our future. And I would hope that more people could have the experiences I had and know what I know, because I'm telling you, as I know the data even about the contributions of Africans in the United States. They are our hope for ourselves. They offer this country a tremendous pathway forward to success and prosperity.
I love the way that you use the word promise, and you've brought up the word hope again. And I just want to end by asking my questions by asking, Cory, what grounds you? You've hinted at various things as we've been talking about what grounds you, but these are difficult times in many, many ways. Yeah. Well,
gratitude is my gravity. It has to be. To know that story of ancestral, my grandmother's grandmother having a husband murdered, moving to coal mines in Iowa with 11 children. I can't think of a woman. I can't even understand how she could have done that. For the family to work in mines. I just think of every string of that took to get me here, the massive sort of conspiracies of grit and guts and grace. How could I not be grounded in a sense of just gratitude? And so gratitude's my gravity that I think keeps me on the ground. And then I'm just and have such ambition for humanity, and I do have a vision or a dream of a world, not in America, where poverty is a thing of the past, and where war is a thing of the past, where human achievement and human flourishing is the norm on this planet. And so I just get grounded by my sense of feeling blessed and lifted every day, that maybe one day, 3 generations from now, they won't remember my name, but that something I did will have made it better for those who are to come.
3 generations from now, they will remember your name, Senator Cory Booker. It's been such a blessing, and we are immensely gratitude to have you with us. And we always have a special few guests at the end to ask questions, and I'm really excited. Elizabeth is going to pull up the guests that we have. I hope one or two of them will be a special little surprise for you. These are all amazing people in their own right. I can just see Danielle Gethers, who is the first Black woman student body president at MIT in 159 years.
Wow, I can't even spell MIT.
So we have her, and then we also have Dr. Chris Howard, president of RMU, who I think you know.
I do know. I'm just jealous because I tried to become president too. It didn't work for me, and he is president. I just don't understand that.
It's not too late, Cory. It's not too late.
It's good to see you, man.
So Okay, and then I'm going, and and then we have, don't want to interrupt this, but we have Luam Mahiri, who is a very special junior student from Cambridge's biggest public high school, I believe, Cambridge Fringe and Latin School, and she was recommended by Natasha Labaz, who is an amazing teacher. She ought to get some Best Teacher in the Country award at some point. I had the pleasure of meeting her, and it's through her that we are just blessed to have Luan with us as well. So,
well, you know this, Sarah, just as long as we're talking about Cambridge, Massachusetts, and not Cambridge, England, because
yes,
that would be problematic for me.
Absolutely problematic. Yes. So glad we clarified that. Let's start with Danielle.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Senator Booker, for being here. And thank you so much, Sarah, for moderating it and inviting me to come. I'm very lucky to be able to serve as a president while there are a lot of other Black presidents. Yale had their first Black president, Stanford had a Black woman president, and a bunch of other schools. And I think one thing we're thinking about is encouraging our schools to think about national racial issues. So I have a question in terms of what is your advice in terms of pushing our school and our agenda to not only think about Black students on campus or just diversity issues that are on campus, but thinking about potentially using our endowment to think about bigger issues nationally, for instance, Black-owned banking or tackling the racial wealth gap?
So, I mean, you just basically answered your own question. I mean, Danielle, the thing is that there is so much work to be done in so many areas that I just hope you guys become activists. And I learned in my journey not to tell people younger than me, never to confine their activism with my own lens, because I think your challenge is to be innovative and creative in the same way that Dorothea Cotton and James Bevel, who changed King, told King to change his tactics in Birmingham that led to beating Bull Connor. It was these young people who think of new ways of doing things. The one thing I'll challenge you on is, you know, the injustices that I'm working on here are not just through the DOJ and the criminal justice system. It's not just through economic justice. Those are often very obvious, but you know, there's food justice issues that are on your campus. A lot of the companies that you all are allowing onto your campus that sell you guys sugar and refined processed foods target Black communities in significant ways. They do more advertising. They place more of their products in, especially around the first of the month. There are a lot of racial issues. Now African Americans, Latinos have epidemic rates of diabetes and mental illness as a result of diet, lack of access to quality foods. I recommend a book for you called Food Fix, which is a good primer on all the food injustices that in fact, there's entire chapters about the social justice issues in 8. And these are companies that you all welcome onto your campus and never call them out for their practices. And so if you ever want to do any work on food justice, get my information from Sarah, and I would love to help you guys understand. But definitely, if you read the chapters in that book about social justice and the targeting of racial minorities by many of these companies for their products that they wouldn't let their own children probably eat at the rate that they're pushing them.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. I definitely follow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. Let's go to Luan.
Hello, my name is Luan Mahari, and I am from Cambridge, Massachusetts. First off, I want to thank Sarah and Elizabeth for giving me this opportunity to be here. And thank you, Senator Booker, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here as well.
Hey, Luan, speak up a little bit more because I'm losing you from time to time.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. Lean in like that.
All right. So my question for you is, you attended predominantly white schools and you've dedicated your career on helping those who aren't always represented or don't often have a voice. Do you think the schools that you went to helped prepare you for being one of the only African Americans in the Senate? And do you feel as if you've ever been silenced or overlooked as one of the only African Americans in your career?
Wow. So you put that away. I didn't think about it because I've had sort of half of my life in a we were the first Blacks in an all white town, as my father used to call us, the 4 raisins and a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. Then I went to Stanford, predominantly white school. Oxford, Chris, was that a predominantly white school, predominantly black school? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was predominantly white there, buddy.
Yeah. Then I came back to Yale. But then I moved to Newark, and I was suddenly in a majority black city for many, many years. But I guess the one thing I would say is, did it prepare me for this? Yeah, it definitely did, in the sense of, you come into these hallways. I remember the reaction I had going from working City Hall one day. I was elected in a special election, so there was no period. I was mayor, then I was a United States senator. And one of my earliest observations was, this is the least diverse place I had ever worked in my life. It made Stanford and Yale look like they were full of diversity. And I remember working here late one night early in my time, maybe the first week or so, and then going to leave, and the night shift was coming in. These are people that do the work to clean or to some of the other architectural work, and it was mostly black people to come in, and that just made me angry. And so what I would say is that there is an obligation to if you're one of the few African Americans, to make sure you're not the last, to open the door as wide as possible. So to Chuck Schumer's credit, me and another senator ally of mine named Brian Schatz from Hawaii, we went to Chuck and Senator Schumer and said, one fix for this that we'd love for you to do is to force every Democratic senator to have to publish the diversity statistics on their staff. And he told me later that he got some pushback from folks, because here are people that get elected by black and brown people, but their offices didn't reflect that. And so since that, we've had 4 years running now that people have been publishing their data. The number of African Americans and Latinos and women being hired on Senate offices have been going consistently up. And so that's just an example for you that it doesn't matter where you are. We said this earlier, blossom where you're planted. Everybody from Harvard Business School case studies to McKinsey, diverse groups are better groups. Universities, the Senate, nonprofits, you name it, are going to be better if they're more inclusive and more diverse. They're going to be far, far more productive and successful.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that great question. Let's go to the amazing.
I'm afraid. Why'd you give him a question?
So,
I should get the question to him.
See, he won't even let me speak your name. The amazing President Howard.
Oh, President.
Oh, man.
Title.
Thank you very, very much. First off, never go after Danielle and Lawum. You two were terrific. Thank you for your questions. Danielle, I just sent an article about you to about 10 of my friends, including Matt Turner, who was president of MIT. He's my classmate from business school. We served in the Air Force together. Great guy. And Lawum, I still have a house in North Cambridge. I went to Harvard Business School years ago. I wasn't smart enough to go to Stanford, but I went to Harvard Business School. And I know Cambridge went into Latin. It's a wonderful school. I wish you all the best. And to Sarah, you are gracious, smart, beautiful, talented. We didn't even need Cory. So thank you, Sarah. You are absolutely wonderful. I only have a couple more minutes, Senator Booker, and I'm going to be quick. I want the record to note I was a better football player at Air Force than Cory was a football player at Stanford. He knows it. I got film. But more importantly, I am so proud of Cory Booker and what he stands for. Sarah, when we were together at Oxford with James Menyike, your husband, everybody knew Cory was a star, and he is a star. He cared deeply. He was cool. He was funny. He was witty, good looking still and everything. So thank you for your service. You, Eric Garcetti, Nader Musavisadeh, James Menyike, Chris Landsberg, Noah Feldman, people stepped up to serve this wonderful world of ours. Here's my question. It goes back to our connection to Africa. Cory knows that my wife is South African. About 30 years ago, when Sarah met James, Chris met Barbara. She is a Jedi Knight, and she's been a Jedi Knight for a long time. And we had the experience as Rhodes Scholars of got there right after Mandela got out of prison. We saw apartheid end, and we witnessed the first election. The first time my wife ever voted was the first time her mom ever voted and her grandmother ever voted. We don't take this for granted in this household. But we saw the diaspora, we saw South Africa have this great rise, and let's just say post-Mandela, it's had its challenges. Cry the beloved country in more ways than one, Cory. How do you digest that hope and promise of a Mandela South Africa with the trials and tribulations? South Africa's not going anywhere. I think Sir Ramaphosa is doing a good job, but there's a pain in an ox compared to what I thought it was going to be, more linear in terms of where it was going to go. But it's like that bright star for the for Africans and people of color and where it's gone. What does that mean to you now, Cory, in terms of what's happening in South Africa? How do you process that, and how do we make sense of that and draw something positive from what happened in South Africa?
So, I mean, look, when that same delegation, we were in Zimbabwe, we were in South Africa, we were there. I mean, we heard a lot about the struggles, and we visited with activists and leaders who are trying to address the persistent inequalities there in a post-Mandela time. I have to say that democracies are hard and complex, and the growth of forces on our planet like globalization have been a mixed bag. So I have to tell you that we have a lot of work to do. And I think that those of us who are in the diaspora and that are, the way I see this, as this powerful nation, the United States of America, has to change its policy towards many of our, many African countries and really start figuring out how we could be using our trade arrangements to empower and not to continue to disempower African nations, because there is so much wealth and potential and greatness in South Africa that gives me hope that it can be, and what we saw it emerging as in the time of Mandela. In fact, I would say if you look at this planet, South Africa is one of those essential nations that humanity needs to thrive and to be successful. And I'm hoping to shape American policy such that we can be a part of that. Thank you, Cory. Last thing, quick comments there. I know you got to go. Barbara and I launched the Impacting Lives Foundation about 20 years ago. We bring about 5-10 South African students of color over every summer. And one of my favorite visits was to see Mayor Booker in your office. You may not remember, Cory, all those years ago. And the students who are thriving now from all different backgrounds, they said that we like New York, we like Philly, we liked Atlanta, but we loved Newark. It made us feel like we were in Joburg. It felt real. It felt authentic, and they loved it. So I want to let you know you have a lot of Newark fans in South Africa. I want to let you know that. When are you going to bring some folk down here, to see me in DC, man? Okay, be careful what you ask for. I'll see you next year. You're buying lunch too. It'll be vegan as long as you're okay with the vegan food, man. Vegan's fine. Vegan's fine. All right.
I'm going to cut this short. I wanted to keep going on, but we've got one last surprise. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Chris. We've got one last surprise for you. Mr. President. President, yes. Cory, we have a former guest on this show who Elizabeth is pulling up now, the great actor, singer, writer, Tatiana Ali, who you may remember as AKA Ashley Banks from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which I believe you watched. Well, this is what gets me upset with them, is they're making me get a whole new platform so I can watch the reunions. Yeah, exactly. Like I have to pay yet another subscription service just because I want to see it so bad. So she is going to round off. She's here. She's going to say a few words and just round off today with a song. Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Hello,
great to see
Sarah.
you.
Hello,
Hey.
everybody.
Hello.
Everyone on here, the light coming from this conversation and from each one of you, and it's just really wonderful. And just thank you, Senator, for all the work that you do, and of course, Sarah, for all the work that you do. And thank you for inviting me. I want to sing a Christmas song. I know we don't have a lot of time, and I thought this one would be appropriate because some of us are going to be with family and friends, and some of us won't be. We're all in different situations. This is my thank you to you, Senator Booker, because you're pretty amazing. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. Next year, all our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year, all our troubles will be miles away. Once again, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us will be near to us once more. Someday soon, we all will be together. If the fates allow, hang a shining star upon the highest bough, and have yourself a merry little Christmas now.
Wow, so beautiful, so beautiful. It's one of my favorite Christmas songs too. Thank you. You are a gift to me on a long day. I'm so grateful, so grateful. Thank you.
Tatiana,
Happy holidays.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
I want to give you a hug.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you. I'm gonna
Sarah,
pass
thank
over.
you. You are awesome. You fill me with great spirit, and I'm grateful for you. So I owe you a big bear hug too. So
Yeah.
I can do that.
Thanks, Cory.
Thank you.
Elizabeth will close it.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to all our fabulous guests on this program today. I can't say enough about how grateful we are to have you on the program. Thank you for giving us your time and your wisdom. We look forward now to a stunning array of guests on Conversations Across the Diaspora for 2021. We're going to keep them secret for now, but we'll begin the series again in February. So please check our website calendar to find out about this series, as well as all of our programming about the African diaspora at Museum of the African Diaspora. Again, everyone, take care of yourselves, be safe, enjoy the holidays, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.